a blow to Putin. Trump is taking money from the Kremlin. The US has hit the Kremlin with a new package of sanctions. And this time, it's not a warning, but a sentence. You have to see this. Washington is cutting off Russia's oxygen. And in Moscow, they already feel it. Panic, market collapse, nervous breakdowns. The foundation of the regime has crumbled. Has the countdown really begun? Don't miss this in our report. Coming up.
America is preparing to deliver the most painful blow to the Kremlin. Donald Trump makes it clear the era of soft sanctions is over. If Russia does not stop the war, the world must cut off its oxygen.
Any country or nation that engages in business or trade with Russia will undoubtedly face extremely serious and severe sanctions.
The US president is ready to sign a new package of sanctions against Russia. According to Reuters, the White House has already sent a signal to Congress. The 47th president will approve the bill, but only on his own terms. If it includes a provision granting him the exclusive personal right to make the final decision on whether to impose sanctions or not. This is precisely what has become the main bargaining chip.
This has always been important for the White House and the president, so that the sanctions package includes an exception granting the president final authority over decision-making. So if this is included, the president will likely consider signing the bill. This was stated by the White House.
The bill was authored by Republican Lindsey Graham and Democrat Richard Blumenthal. The document provides for 500% tariffs on imports from countries that purchase Russian oil, gas, and uranium. The goal is not just to strike at the Kremlin, but also to cut off all oxygen to Moscow's partners who continue to support the financing of the war.
At this moment, Trump's determination to further pressure the Russian Federation, particularly its oil market, remains quite active.
Trump's new sanctions could deal a crushing blow to the Kremlin's economy. The Russian oil market risks losing its key buyers. India, China, and Middle Eastern countries are under threat. We are being urged to expand the list of targets and add Iran, a country that helps Moscow circumvent restrictions and strengthen its oil.
A timeout on the introduction of reciprocal sanctions. Most likely part of the Russian oil market in China remains intact. At the same time, countries that were the second and third largest buyers of oil, namely India and Turkey, are now actively seeking alternative sanction-compliant supplies. And
while across the ocean they are preparing to deliver a decisive blow, Naref is left to deal with the consequences of yet another sanctions package. At the end of October, the US introduced a new package of sanctions against the Russian oil sector. Rosneft, Lukoil, and 31 of their
At the same time, we've already heard that the American company Chevron received preliminary approval from the U.S. Treasury Department to negotiate with Lukoil about purchasing some of their foreign assets. The estimated value of this package is around $20 billion. Well, in any case, such moves are underway. We need to understand that the assets we're talking about are the very instruments through which the Russian Federation sells oil. If these instruments end up in other hands, Russia will have far fewer opportunities to guarantee the current volume of oil sales.
If the bill is ultimately signed and countries under US pressure reduce their purchases, the blow to Russia's budget revenues will be catastrophic. Even propaganda will no longer be able to hide the real economic consequences, and the Kremlin will feel pressure it has not faced throughout the entire full-scale war.
Until we see a finalized bill, until it is at least officially approved by the majority of the American Parliament in this situation, it is essentially nothing more than, let's say, just words.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Turkey is entering the game firmly and without any diplomatic courtesies. Ankara has come in with such pressure that the Kremlin is already twitching nervously. Erdoğan is publicly putting Moscow in its place. And this is just the beginning. Rumors are spreading in Turkish circles that a meeting between Zelensky and Putin is being prepared. Why has Turkey suddenly switched to maximum influence mode so abruptly? And will Erdoğan dare to squeeze a peaceful solution out of the Kremlin? All the details coming up in just a moment.
Turkey is making a bold statement. Peace in Ukraine is not just a goal, but an inevitability.
We are working on ending the war. I hope you will see everything soon.
Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan stated in an interview with the press that even those who did not want the war to end are starting to think differently.
The war must end. We consider negotiations to be inevitable. Personally, I believe that negotiations will resume. Of course, we cannot go into details. This could happen in Turkey, it could happen somewhere else, but I believe that peace will definitely come.
According to him, for 3 to 4 years there were forces that actively hindered the end of the war. But now a classic turning point has come. These groups are changing their position. FIDA calls the war a war of attrition, where neither side can emerge victorious, and the losses are enormous, human, economic, and political.
Of course, the war must come to an end. This has been our policy from the very beginning. But in America and Europe, there were very influential groups that did not want this to stop.
He also emphasizes that diplomacy remains the main path to peace. Turkey believes in creating a peace platform, possibly on its own territory. At the same time, Fidan does not disclose all the details for obvious reasons, but he states directly that peace is not just necessary, it is inevitable.
Right now, we are living through the darkest moment, because both sides are focused on destroying each other's transport and energy infrastructure. They are striking military targets and have reached a deadlock. Now this has turned into a war of drones.
In addition, the minister emphasizes the serious burden that the war places on European countries. The financing of military aid is destabilizing budgets. Money is going not only to defense, education, healthcare, and infrastructure are suffering.
The European side is not actively participating in the war by sending troops, but it is constantly involved in the war with its money and support, and it is very costly. The blockade of Russia. You don't buy energy, you don't trade with it, with Russia. You have to pay for that.
However, Fidan also sees obstacles. According to him, the main one remains the status of the Donbas territories, specifically control over the territories of the so-called DPR. He warns that any regulation must be realistic, taking into account the situation at the front and the interests of both sides. At the same time, Turkey is ready to play an active role. Fidan stated that Ankara will not refuse any role in the peace process and that negotiations must be long-term and effective.
Winter is ahead of us. What we see now is that we actually have all the conditions for peace, for a ceasefire.
If we believe the Turkish Foreign Ministry now may be the closest point to ending the fighting and moving to diplomacy.
I think this war is now going through its worst phase because both sides are focused on destroying transport and energy infrastructure. Now it has turned into a drone war. No one can move anywhere. Only those who are considered expendable are advancing.
An important warning from Fidan. A peace platform is possible, but unpleasant decisions, including territorial ones, may be part of a future agreement.
At this very moment, everything is burning and falling apart for Putin. Targeted strikes by the Ukrainian armed forces have left the Russians without gas. And at the front, the enemy's situation is even worse. Imaginary conquered cities struck the Russian army at the most unexpected moment. What a turn of events. Kupiansk shattered the Russians to molecules. A storm of fury from an ally is sweeping toward Ukraine. Paris is personally tearing Moscow apart. Don't miss the first details coming up next. Russia is on fire. An underground section of a main gas pipeline exploded in Omsk. Additionally, drones attacked the two main thermal power plants in the occupied part of Donetsk region. The city and several other settlements lost power. But that's not all. The Russians are bombing their own people. In Belgorod region alone, over the past 11 days, 8 aerial bombs have fallen from Russian aircraft onto the heads of local residents, causing fires and destruction.
Cars burned, a fire broke out, they hit minibuses, 14 or 18 people were killed. What is this? And
while the Russians are dealing with the consequences in the rear, the occupiers are also getting hit at the front. Drone forces destroyed Russian robots in a critical area. The armed forces of Ukraine disrupted a new supply scheme for the occupiers. The battle continues. The advance of the occupying army in the Pokrovsk and Mirnograd area is minimal, despite the enormous resources the enemy has thrown at this direction, which is a priority for them. The occupiers are trying to encircle Ukrainian forces and close the pocket, according to analysts from the Institute for the Study of War.
The Ukrainian defense forces are carrying out successful counterattacks not only in Pokrovsk itself, but also along the Pokrovsk direction. first and foremost these concerns. And the successful actions of the Ukrainian defense forces in the Shakov area, which in turn creates problems for the logistics of the occupying forces, have managed to significantly stabilize the situation in the Rodinsky area. Rodinsky is a key logistics hub for the Ukrainian defense forces.
In Kupiansk, Russian troops were unable to encircle the armed forces and are gradually losing positions within the city itself. Ukrainian defenders managed to cut the occupiers off from their main supply lines in the northern part of the city. In
the city of Kupiansk itself, Russian assault groups are effectively cut off from ground logistics. The occupiers' logistics are being pushed back due to the use of heavy drones. The occupiers in Kupiansk are using the so-called infiltration tactics of small assault groups and the flag take tactics. That is, by infiltrating groups of 2 to 3 people, they try to create the appearance of a presence. By installing the so-called Russian Aquafresh, they create the appearance of the presence of occupation army units in certain areas of Kupiansk.
And France is developing a new generation of air defense systems, SAMP-T. Ukraine will be the first country to receive these systems. For now, the delivery dates are not being disclosed. As Zelensky reported, the new generation of air defense systems represents a very serious level for intercepting Russian ballistic missiles. This is
essentially the European equivalent of the Patriot missile systems. At the moment, according to various estimates, up to 2 SAM-PT systems have already been delivered to Ukraine's defense forces. The SAM-PT system consists of 6 launchers and a radar station. Currently, according to open sources, the French army itself has up to 10 SAM-T systems in service.
Meanwhile, Poland is preparing to send territorial defense troops to patrol the most important parts of critical railway infrastructure in the east of the country after sabotage was carried out on a line near Lublin. The Polish General Staff is even preparing for an attack.
Let me remind you that in 2015, Ben Hodges stated that the Suwałki corridor is NATO's Achilles heel, and I remember that the Suwałki corridor is a land corridor which, according to the Russians, is supposed to connect the Republic of Belarus with the Kaliningrad region and accordingly pass through the territory of Poland and the Baltic states. That is why the Polish side takes the possibility of a direct confrontation with the Russian Federation very seriously.
Moreover, Ukrainian military personnel may be involved in defending the eastern borders of the EU from Russia in the event that the war ends with a peace agreement.